Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's edition of CNF Talks. It's a great pleasure to have with me today Mary O'Connor, who's a non-executive director at Cairn. Mary's going to be joining us to speak at the 10th Annual Culture and Conduct for Financial Services Summit, which is being held in London on the 4th of February next year. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Very good to have you with us. Last month, the FCA published the results of a survey of 1,000 firms on how they manage and record incidents of non-financial misconduct. They have also indicated that they will publish the results of their diversity and inclusion consultation, which is likely to incorporate non-financial misconduct into the conduct rules by the end of this year. Do you think that the culture in the city has changed, or is sexual harassment and bullying still commonplace? And do you think it is something that regulation can actually affect?
So I think this is one of the most important areas that the FCA has looked into in recent times. I
Mm,
think sexism, unfortunately, is a part of society. And while I think many firms do a good job, attempting to ensure that they minimize incidents and respond appropriately to incidents, nonetheless, I think this still exists, and it is a blight on the lives of a number of people in the industry. And I think as board members, we need to step up to take reasonable steps to prevent non-financial misconduct, and having the regulators make clear the expectations around both boards and companies, both to prevent it and to respond appropriately to it, I think will help to support victims and reduce the levels of it
mm,
everywhere.
mm. But do you think that the regulation by itself is sufficient, or do you think that there is more that the board and senior management should be undertaking themselves? Is it something so deeply in the DNA of organisations that a wholesale rethink is required of senior management as to how they deal with this issue?
Look, I think the expectations of society in terms of what companies need to do around some of these big issues has changed. And I think
Mm,
the regulation is a start, but it isn't the be all and end all in terms of what companies have to do. I
mm,
think it's good that the regulators have set this expectation and will give companies, I think, some kind of guidance in terms of
yeah.
the things that they need to do to get started. But at the end of the day, the responsibility lies with boards and then with the executives to make sure that they are helping people to understand what their expectations are around appropriate behavior, making sure that people feel safe to be able to speak up, supporting
Yeah.
victims when they do speak up, and then taking steps to stamp it out. So I think, look, it's the start, but we all have a lot more we need to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in addition to sexual harassment, sex discrimination is still a major issue, with women very underrepresented at board level. What do you think leaders can do to redress the balance? And is positive discrimination quotas the answer?
Oh, look, that is the hot topic, isn't it? So, look, I
Mm,
think at the end of the day, there is still very significant barriers to people who are different. Whether it be by gender, women, or whether it be anyone who is different from the standards. It is. I've heard it described as having to swim upstream against the
mm,
current. Whereas
yeah,
if you're a kind of standard person, you don't. So, look, I think boards and leaders do need to step up. And particularly, I think you need to have a focus on getting senior leaders into those women and diverse people into those what I'll call money slot positions, right?
yeah,
CEO,
yeah,
CFO, COO, head of marketing, head of sales, things where they have P&L responsibility, both from a role modeling perspective and because there's a lot of evidence that says that when you put people who are different in those positions, they then change the system underneath, right, to enable other people to do it. But I think, look,
yeah.
it's a leadership issue. People need to understand the value and how to get the value out of managing diverse teams, and they need to
Mm,
learn how to do it and want to do it well. And when they do it well, right, you'll see this benefit, this uplift, where
yeah.
people will innovate more, be able to do more. but you also have to support people at all levels of the journey. My experience from being a CEO is that you can't just make a pronouncement and let it happen. The reality is it starts from the minute people are recruited. Do people
Yeah.
who are different, do women feel comfortable in the recruitment process? Are they given the same levels of training? Are they given the same assignments and opportunities? Are they given the mentorship and the support to be able to be supported throughout it? So it's a really, every level of your organization needs to work on this.
Yeah, it's a real challenge, isn't it? As you describe them, the money positions, the executive positions on the board. I remember seeing some research. I can't remember whether it's the 30% Club or whether it's Women in Banking and Finance, but some research showing that the women are well represented up to the positions perhaps just beneath the board. And then when you look at board composition, yes, there are plenty of NEDs, but in terms of executive positions and CEO positions, such as the one that you yourself have occupied, it tends to fall off quite dramatically.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I think that's the piece that you need to break through. I think, there's some interesting statistics on the authority gap, right? That people are used to seeing leaders of a certain type, and anybody who's different from that struggles to get in. And I think we all need to kind of understand that and support that change, because I think, again, the evidence is that when you get people, women and other diverse people, into those positions, they then help bring other people along, right? But not only are they role models, you're like, okay, if you're a young woman, you say, I can do it because Mary's been at the top. But also significantly, I understand, because when I was a CEO, the barriers that I was facing trying to get to that level, that I could then take steps to make it easier for other people.
Yeah, because it does appear to be a bit of a cliff edge, doesn't it? That so thus far, the measures that have been taken to try and counter this problem have encouraged women to get to that position of senior management. But what is it that prevents them from the leap from that, as it were, onto main board executive positions? From your experience, have you been able to identify what the key block is?
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, there's a lot of research around it, right? That would say
Mm,
that women are judged more harshly on their sort of outputs and their behaviors than others are,
yeah.
because they're just more scrutinized.
Mm,
And I'd say in my experience that is broadly true. I think, I, you know, my experiences have always come up when something is different. I always say to people, go white, brown, or green if you're a woman, because that's been my experience, right? Where you're doing
mm,
something. So, for instance, my first opportunity was out when I was at KPMG. I had to go in to help KPMG separate its audit and non-audit business. Only an outsider could do it. So I had this great
yeah.
opportunity, a white space, right? Green space where no one is, moving into things like ESG or digital, where there are
Mm,
fewer people. Those are the opportunities. Or where things are a mess, right? Glass
I
cliff
see.
is a real thing, right? and
Mm,
and so going to that. So I think, those are the sort of obvious things. But what I'd like to see is where women are on the succession planning, where they're groomed and mentored in order to be able to be successful in kind of BAU businesses where you're being set up for success and you don't have to make it
mm.
yourself as
Yeah, I
much.
think that's certainly a valuable insight. I mean, turning to technology, AI is set to revolutionize traditional organizational structures. How do you think it will impact the culture of financial services firms?
So look, it's a double-edged sword, like everything. But on balance, I think I'm very positive about it.
Mm,
I think that AI has the ability to free up people to spend time doing the things that they're great at. Developing good
mm,
relationships, thinking of new and innovative ideas,
yeah.
and applying kind of their knowledge and their experience to do things that will maximize the potential of businesses. But at the same time, we have to be careful. Like, there's been very many studies that show that AI, if not carefully controlled, will reflect the biases of underlying society and the underlying
Mm,
sort of data that gets put into it. So we just need to be very careful that we're not reinforcing the bad things rather than opening up the good things.
absolutely. And are you with those who fear the ultimate form of AI and its potential for harm, or do you think it's largely going to be confined to productivity and improving operational performance and taking away some of the tedium of jobs of all kinds at all levels? But when it comes to perhaps moving into decision making at an increasingly senior level, do you think that poses a threat to the career opportunities for people aiming for board level?
Yeah, look, on balance, again, I think I'm quite positive on it. I think at the end of the
Mm,
day, this is a tool that we should be using, controlling, thinking, using thoughtfully, right?
mm,
In order to enhance what we do rather than to take away from what we do.
mm, mm.
The reality is, I think data is always your friend if you can really understand what's going on. When
Yeah.
you run a really big company, which I have, the biggest issue is that you're trying to get down into understanding, what is it my customers really want? Why is it they really want to buy something or not buy something? Or,
Yeah.
what are the trends that are happening that are interfering with them or creating opportunities for them? And ultimately, the better we understand that, the more that we can open up those opportunities. But I think we have to do it thoughtfully. And I don't think that the move through AI will happen as quickly as everyone is saying, because
Mm,
I do think, you'll have to put some thought into it, and to ensure that we're taking the good parts and not reflecting the bad parts.
yeah. I'm an optimist. I agree with you. I think that's probably all we have time for. For our viewers, I very much hope that you will be able to join us in person in London on the 4th of February to attend the summit, to hear further from Mary and from all the other speakers we have speaking. Just remains for me to say, Mary, thank you very much for sharing those thoughts with us today.
Oh, thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.